Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction inspired by true events. The characters and situations depicted are for narrative purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons or actual incidents is purely coincidental. This story explores complex themes such as age gap relationships and infidelity, which may be sensitive for some readers. Reader discretion is advised. I never imagined that at 56 years old, my life would take such a turn, that I would find myself caught up in something so reckless, so consuming, especially with someone 37 years younger than me. Looking back, it all began in the most ordinary way, almost innocently. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when I first saw him, a young man with bright eyes and an easy smile, working at the local bookstore. I'd stopped in to browse, something I often did to escape the loneliness that sometimes crept in despite having a family and a career. He was 19, fresh out of high school, full of dreams and energy that seemed to radiate around him. Our first conversation was brief, a casual exchange about a book I asked for, but there was something about his youthful curiosity that drew me in. At first, I told myself it was just a friendly connection. I needed a distraction, someone to talk to, a break from the routine. He was polite, attentive, and respectful, and I was surprised at how easy it was to open up to him. Despite the obvious age difference, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. He listened without judgment, and I found comfort in that. Still, I was aware of the line I couldn't cross. Society had made it clear, this kind of relationship was taboo, irresponsible, even dangerous. I thought I could control my feelings, that it would stay as a simple friendship, nothing more. But sometimes, the heart doesn't listen to reason. We began to talk more often. What started as bookstore visits turned into longer conversations over coffee, laughter shared under the warm glow of street lamps, and moments when time seemed to pause. I told myself I was just enjoying companionship. But deep inside, a spark was growing, something I didn't expect and couldn't quite understand. The age gap haunted me. How could someone so young truly understand me? Would people think I was crazy, selfish, or worse? I was married once, many years ago, and though that chapter of my life was closed, I was still cautious about the consequences. Yet, with him, I felt alive again, seen, desired, important. That first meeting, so unassuming, set off a chain of events I never intended. The connection between us was undeniable, and as much as I tried to convince myself to stop, the pull was too strong. I was about to step into a world of secrets, risks, and emotions I hadn't felt in decades. This story isn't just about infidelity. It's about loneliness, unexpected desires, and the complicated choices we make when we crave connection. It's about the blurred lines between right and wrong, and how sometimes, life takes us places we never planned to go. As days turned into weeks, our relationship quietly shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. What had started as casual conversations in the bookstore and brief coffee meetups gradually deepened into something far more intense and complicated. The line between friendship and something more began to blur, and I found myself crossing boundaries I never imagined crossing. At first, it was innocent enough, lingering touches on the arm, shared smiles that held more meaning than words, subtle glances that hinted at feelings neither of us dared speak aloud. But beneath that fragile surface, an undeniable attraction grew stronger every day. I was a woman in her mid-50s, and he was barely out of his teens, yet the energy between us was electric, impossible to ignore. I kept telling myself it was just a fleeting infatuation, a momentary lapse fueled by loneliness and curiosity. But the truth was far more complicated. The excitement of his youth awakened something inside me that had long been dormant, and for the first time in years, I felt desirable again. He listened to me with genuine interest, treated me with a tenderness I hadn't known in a long time, and for that, I was grateful, even if it was wrong. Our meetings became more frequent and private. We started texting late into the night, sharing secrets and dreams we hadn't told anyone else. I was careful not to let anyone find out. The guilt gnawed at me, but the thrill of keeping our relationship hidden only made it more intoxicating. I knew I was playing with fire, but I didn't want to stop. He was so young, so full of life, yet there was a wisdom in his eyes that surprised me. He didn't treat me like an older woman to be pitied or ignored. Instead, He saw me as a person, complex and real. It was flattering and terrifying all at once. I worried about the future, about what this could mean for both of us, but I was caught in the moment, unable to pull away. There were times when I questioned myself, was I being selfish? Was I ruining my own life and possibly his? But when I looked into his eyes, I convinced myself that what we had was genuine, something rare and special that transcended age and judgment. Still, the fear lingered. What if someone found out? What if this all blew up in my face? Despite my fears, I allowed myself to feel hope that maybe this relationship could survive outside the shadows, that maybe we could find a way to be together without the world's condemnation. But deep down, I knew the reality was harsh and complicated. Society would never accept us. Friends and family would be shocked, even horrified. Yet, the more I tried to suppress my feelings, the stronger they became. The boundaries I thought I'd never cross were slipping away one by one. It was no longer just emotional, the attraction was physical too, a dangerous but undeniable force that pulled us closer. I remember the night it finally happened, when we crossed that invisible line and gave into the desire we'd both been fighting. It was a moment of vulnerability, passion, and confusion. I was filled with guilt but also a strange sense of liberation. I knew then that things would never be the same again. After that night, everything changed. Our relationship moved into a secret world that existed only between the two of us, hidden from the prying eyes of family, friends, and society. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once, like walking on a razor's edge where one wrong step could unravel everything. We became masters of concealment. Our meetings were carefully planned, always in places where no one we knew would spot us. Coffee shops in quiet corners, late-night drives with no destination, and secret texts filled with coded messages became the fabric of our connection. It was exhilarating to live in this double life, to be able to share parts of ourselves that were completely off-limits to everyone else. Every stolen moment felt precious, as if the world outside no longer existed. We laughed, talked, and touched in ways that felt both new and familiar. The age difference faded when we were alone, replaced by an intimacy that neither of us expected to find. I felt alive again, like a woman rediscovering parts of herself she thought were lost. But the secret also brought immense pressure. We both knew this couldn't last forever, yet neither of us wanted to let go. The fear of being discovered was a constant shadow, gnawing at my peace of mind. What if someone saw us together? What if a text message slipped into the wrong hands? These thoughts haunted me every day. Still, the intensity of our relationship made it impossible to step back. He was no longer just the 19-year-old boy from the bookstore, he had become someone I cared deeply for. He looked at me not as an older woman, but as a partner, someone to trust and confide in. That trust felt fragile but real. At times, I caught myself thinking about what others would say if they knew. Would they judge me harshly? Would they call me selfish or reckless? The weight of societal norms pressed down on me, reminding me that this was a taboo no one would forgive easily. Despite this, the connection we shared was genuine. We talked about our fears, our dreams, and the uncertainty of what the future held. He was honest about his feelings, sometimes more mature than I expected, and I found comfort in his sincerity. But the secret world we created was a prison as much as it was a refuge. I had to hide my emotions, my excitement, and my fear behind a carefully constructed mask. The guilt of betrayal weighed heavily on me, not just toward others, but toward myself. I knew I was risking everything for a relationship that many would never understand. Still, I couldn't deny the happiness it brought me. For a while, that was enough. But secrets have a way of slipping out, no matter how tightly we try to hold them in. The weight of our secret began to crush me. Every smile he gave, every whispered word between us, was tinged with a mixture of joy and fear. I was caught in an emotional storm, torn between the happiness he brought me and the crushing guilt that followed like a shadow I couldn't shake. I started to see myself through the eyes of others, the judgment waiting just beneath the surface. The age difference, so glaring and undeniable, felt like a public sentence even though no one outside our secret knew about us yet. I was a woman who should have known better, who should have had more restraint. Instead, I was tangled up with a boy barely out of his teens, risking everything I had built in my life. Sometimes, the guilt was unbearable. I thought of my family, my friends, the people who trusted me. How could I explain this? Could I even find the words? What would they think if they knew I was living a lie? Those questions haunted me daily, eating away at my sense of self. And then there was the betrayal, of myself, of those who loved me, and even, at times, of him. I remembered my past, my marriage, the vows I made, the promises I thought I'd kept. This affair wasn't just about desire, it was about a deeper emptiness I hadn't faced before. It was about loneliness disguised as passion. He, too, felt the pressure. I could see it in his eyes, the uncertainty, the fear of what our relationship meant to him. Sometimes, he questioned if we were doing the right thing, if this was just a fleeting chapter or something real. The youth in him fought with the seriousness of our situation, and it broke my heart. Society's judgment was a constant presence, even in silence. I was painfully aware of the unspoken rules I had broken, the whispered condemnation that would follow if anyone found out. The fear of being labeled reckless or worse made me retreat at times, causing tension between us. Yet, despite the guilt and the looming judgment, there was no denying the connection we shared. It was raw, real, and messy, not the neat, perfect love stories people often imagine. It was complicated, and it challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and the world. In quiet moments, I questioned my own morality. Was I selfish for pursuing happiness at such a cost? Was I damaging a young man's life by dragging him into this? These doubts were like a heavy fog that clouded my mind. But every time I looked at him, felt his hand in mine, I was reminded why I stayed, why I risked it all. It wasn't just about physical attraction. It was about being understood, valued, and alive in a way I hadn't been in years. Still, deep down, I knew the turning point was coming. The delicate balance we maintained couldn't hold forever. Everything came to a head one evening I still can't forget, the moment when the fragile world we'd built began to crumble. Up until then, we had managed to keep our affair carefully hidden, a secret whispered only between us. But secrets like ours have a way of escaping, no matter how tightly you try to hold them. That night, I was supposed to meet him at our usual quiet cafe, a safe place where no one would recognize us. But as I walked in, I caught sight of a familiar face, a friend I hadn't seen in years, sitting at a nearby table. Panic froze me. I tried to keep calm, but my heart pounded in my chest like a warning bell. He arrived a few minutes later, unaware of the risk, smiling as always. But when our friend's eyes landed on us, everything shifted. A few whispered words, a quick glance, and I knew our secret was no longer safe. The walls around me felt like they were closing in. After that night, the tension was unbearable. The friend who had seen us began to act distant and cold, and I could sense the rumors starting to stir in my social circle. It wasn't long before whispers reached my family, and the thin veil of privacy we'd kept shattered. I remember the argument that followed with my closest family member, a mixture of disappointment, anger, and fear. They couldn't understand why I would involve myself with someone so young. I tried to explain, to make them see it wasn't as simple as they thought, but the pain in their eyes told me everything. I had crossed a line they believed should never be crossed. He, too, was feeling the weight of exposure. The carefree, confident young man I had fallen for now looked tired and uncertain. We both realized that the risk we'd taken was no longer a secret game but a reality with serious consequences. That moment forced us to confront what our relationship really meant. Was it something we could fight for, or was it destined to end in heartbreak? We talked for hours, sharing fears and hopes, trying to find a path forward. But even in that dark moment, there was a strange clarity. We both knew that what we had was real, but also complicated beyond repair. The outside world was no longer an abstract threat, it was closing in fast, ready to expose every truth we'd tried to hide. For me, the turning point was painful but necessary. I realized I couldn't live in hiding forever. The lies, the stolen moments, the fear of discovery, they were slowly destroying me. But walking away wasn't simple either. I was tangled in emotions that wouldn't let go so easily. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with difficult choices, painful truths, and the question that haunted me every day: how far was I willing to go for love? The aftermath of that night was a storm I hadn't prepared for. Once the secret slipped out, everything spiraled quickly, more than I could have imagined. The carefully maintained balance of my life shattered, and with it came consequences I never thought I'd face. Word spread faster than I expected. People I barely knew whispered behind my back. Friends became distant. Some family members confronted me with disbelief and anger. I was no longer just a woman living her life, I had become a subject of judgment and gossip. The age gap that was once just a quiet secret now became a glaring headline in every conversation. My career wasn't spared either. Rumors trickled down to colleagues and clients. I noticed the subtle changes in their behavior, the once warm greetings replaced by awkward silence, the cancelled meetings, the sideways glances. I was haunted by the fear that my professional reputation might be permanently damaged. He, the young man at the center of it all, was also not immune to the fallout. His family, unaware until then, reacted harshly. I could sense his world collapsing. The carefree youth I once knew was replaced by someone burdened with shame and uncertainty. I tried to be his rock, but I felt fragile myself. The worst part was the confrontation with those closest to me. My adult children were devastated and angry, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the choices I'd made. Their disappointment cut deeper than I expected. I saw the pain in their eyes, the loss of trust, the fear that our family would never be the same. Despite all this, I stood firm in one truth: what we shared was real, no matter how complicated or wrong it seemed to others. I didn't expect forgiveness or understanding, but I needed them to see that I wasn't simply reckless or selfish. I was a woman who found a connection in the most unlikely place, someone who craved love and companionship when she felt invisible. But reality was unforgiving. The scandal meant doors closed. People stopped calling. Invitations to family gatherings disappeared. It felt like I was slowly being erased from the life I once had. The young man struggled too. His schooling suffered, and friends distanced themselves. His family demanded he end things immediately, threatening to cut ties if he didn't. The pressure was enormous, and I feared what would happen if he cracked under it all. We both realized that this wasn't just about us anymore. Our choices had ripple effects that hurt those around us, and ourselves. The secret relationship had exploded into a public crisis, and there was no easy way out. I often wondered if things could have been different, if we'd stayed silent, or never crossed that line. But deep down, I knew we had taken a risk we were willing to pay for, even if the price was high. Now, facing the consequences, the question remained: could we survive the fallout? Or was this the beginning of the end? The emotional toll of everything that happened was more overwhelming than I could have prepared for. Every day felt like walking through a storm, unpredictable, relentless, and exhausting. I was caught between the love I felt for him and the harsh reality that our relationship had created. The guilt was constant, a heavy weight pressing down on my heart. I felt guilty for hurting my family, for breaking trust, and for putting someone so young in the middle of this chaos. I wondered if I was selfish for wanting to keep going, for clinging to a relationship that so many condemned. At the same time, the shame was suffocating. I felt exposed, as if the world knew my darkest secret and was waiting to punish me for it. I struggled to look people in the eye, fearing the judgment that lay beneath polite smiles and polite silence. It was as though I had become a public spectacle, my private life no longer mine to protect. The young man, my lover, was struggling in ways I hadn't anticipated. The pressure from his family and friends was relentless, and I could see the strain it placed on him. He was torn between loyalty to me and the demands of those who wanted him to walk away. His youthful optimism was being chipped away by harsh reality, replaced with anxiety and doubt. Sometimes, we fought, arguments fueled by frustration, fear, and confusion. The age gap that once seemed insignificant now felt like an insurmountable wall. We questioned if this relationship could survive the storm or if it was doomed to collapse under the weight of everything against it. But in quieter moments, when the world was shut out, I still saw the boy I had fallen for, the way he looked at me with honesty and care, the way he held my hand as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Those moments reminded me why I had taken the risk in the first place. Yet, the uncertainty gnawed at me. Would this storm ever pass? Could we find peace amidst the chaos? Or was I fooling myself, holding on to a dream that was destined to shatter? The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. Friends who had once been close faded away, unable or unwilling to understand. The loneliness seeped into my bones, a reminder that some choices come with a price no one talks about. I began to question everything, my decisions, my desires, my own sense of self. Was this the woman I wanted to be? Was this the life I wanted to live? But even as doubt clouded my mind, I knew one thing: this story wasn't over yet. There were still decisions to make, paths to choose, and consequences to face. And somehow, in the midst of it all, I was still searching for a way to hold on. After months of turmoil, heartache, and difficult conversations, I reached a place I never expected: acceptance. Not the easy kind, but the kind that comes from facing the truth head-on, no matter how painful it is. Our relationship, with all its passion and complexity, had changed both of us in ways that would last a lifetime. We had taken a risk that few would understand, and though it came with consequences, it was also a chapter of my life that taught me more about myself than years of comfort ever had. He and I made the difficult decision to step back, not because the feelings weren't real, but because the world around us was not ready, and maybe, neither were we. The pressure from family, friends, and society was immense, and continuing down that path threatened to destroy not only us but everything else we cared about. It was heartbreaking to say goodbye to what we shared, but it was also liberating. Letting go allowed me to reclaim parts of myself that I had lost in the secrecy and guilt. I began the slow process of healing, rebuilding relationships with family, focusing on my own needs, and learning to forgive myself. For him, it was a time of growth too. We promised to support each other from a distance, carrying the lessons we learned into our separate futures. There was no bitterness, only gratitude for a connection that had been unexpected but meaningful. Looking back, I don't regret what happened. It was a story of human imperfection, of loneliness, desire, mistakes, and courage. I was reminded that love doesn't always come in neat packages or follow society's rules. Sometimes, it's messy, complicated, and painful, but still real. I learned to accept that life isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity and the bravery to face your truth, even when it scares you. The judgment of others no longer holds the power it once did. I am stronger now, shaped by experience, and ready to move forward. This story, my story, isn't just about infidelity or an unlikely romance. It's about finding myself in the unexpected, embracing vulnerability, and understanding that sometimes, the hardest journeys lead to the deepest growth. As I close this chapter, I carry with me the bittersweet memories and the hope that someday, all wounds will heal, and all stories, no matter how complicated, will find peace.